If you enjoy videos like this, subscribe to the channel before the video starts. The sun was slowly setting behind the tall pine trees, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The quiet mountain air smelled fresh, filled with the scent of pine needles and wet soil. In the middle of this peaceful forest stood a small, cozy cabin. Its wooden walls had a warm, rustic charm, and the little garden in front was full of colorful flowers. It was the kind of place that promised peace, a place where life's problems could melt away with the gentle sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the wind. Inside the cabin, John and his wife, Sarah, were unpacking boxes. Moving here had been a dream for both of them. After years of busy city life, the constant noise, the crowded streets, and the stressful jobs, they wanted a calm, simple life. Their cabin was small but perfect. A fireplace in the living room, a kitchen with big windows, and a porch where they could sit and watch the forest. For them, this was freedom, a place where they could breathe and feel happy. But little did they know, their peaceful life was about to face a very unusual challenge. A soft knock on the door startled them. John put down the box he was carrying and went to see who it was. When he opened the door, there stood a woman in her mid-50s, wearing a crisp outfit and a serious expression. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her glasses made her look very strict. She held a clipboard in her hand and a small notebook tucked under her arm. This was Karen, the HOA officer. Karen's eyes scanned the cabin, and she didn't even smile. She was the kind of person who believed rules were more important than happiness, more important than common sense. John had heard about her before moving here. Neighbors whispered about HOA Karen as if she were a legend. Some said she would complain about anything: too tall grass, too small garden flowers, even the color of a welcome mat. "Hello, I'm Karen," she said, her voice sharp and precise. "I am with the Homeowners Association. I need to talk to you about a few matters regarding your property." John nodded politely. "Sure, Karen. Please come in." Sarah gave him a curious look. She had a feeling this wasn't going to be a simple visit. As Karen stepped inside, she didn't glance around with admiration like most visitors would. Instead, her eyes seemed to search for problems. She walked slowly, almost like she was inspecting every corner, every piece of furniture. John and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances. Something about Karen made the air feel tense, like a storm was approaching, even though the sky outside was calm. Karen stopped in the living room and turned to them. "I noticed your mailbox is slightly tilted. That is not according to our community rules," she said, pointing at the little wooden mailbox by the porch. "And your front door, it might be too dark. The association prefers lighter colors." John and Sarah were confused. They had just moved in, and the door had been here for years. The mailbox was old but functional. They had expected some rules, of course, but this felt extreme. Sarah tried to smile. "Oh, we just moved in. We haven't had a chance to fix anything yet." Karen didn't smile back. Instead, she took out a pen and scribbled something in her notebook. "You have 30 days to comply. Or there will be consequences. Fines may apply." John felt his stomach twist. Consequences? Fines? Over a mailbox and a door color? It felt unreal. "Is there anything else?" John asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Karen's lips tightened. "We'll see," she said, tapping her clipboard. Then, without another word, she left, closing the door firmly behind her. The click echoed in the cabin, leaving an unexpected chill in the air. John closed the door slowly, turning to Sarah. "Well, that was something." Sarah crossed her arms and frowned. "Something?" "John, that was terrifying. Who comes into someone's new home and threatens them like that?" They tried to shake it off, telling themselves that maybe it was just the first day stress, the nervousness of moving into a new place. But as the night fell, and they sat by the fireplace, the thought of Karen kept creeping into their minds. Who was this woman, and why did she feel she had the right to control their lives? The next morning, the mailbox seemed to mock them. It leaned slightly to the right, exactly as Karen had said. And the door, well, the dark brown color suddenly looked menacing under the morning sunlight. John laughed nervously. We're not in the city anymore, Sarah. This is different. Sarah didn't laugh. Instead, she went to the window and looked at the trees. John, this Karen. I don't trust her. She's not going to leave us alone. I can feel it. John nodded, though he wanted to stay positive. But deep down, he knew Sarah was right. Something about Karen's attitude, the way she had scanned their cabin, her sharp words, it felt like she wanted control. And not just small control, full control over their lives, over their little paradise. Over the next few days, Karen's presence became more noticeable. She would walk slowly past their cabin, notebook in hand, looking at everything. Sometimes she would wave politely, but her eyes always seemed critical. Letters arrived, politely worded but firm, reminding them of minor rules. Your garden plants are not in the approved layout, one letter read. Another said, please ensure your trash bins are hidden according to community rules. Every letter felt heavier than the last. Every visit, every glance, made their peaceful cabin feel a little smaller, a little less safe. John tried to joke about it. Maybe she's just passionate about community rules, he said. But Sarah didn't laugh. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah spoke quietly. John, I think we need to be ready. This is just the beginning. She's not going to stop. She's going to try to control everything we do here. John sighed. He wanted to relax, to enjoy the forest, to feel the freedom they had dreamed about. But deep down, he knew Sarah was right. Karen wasn't just a strict HOA officer. She was a storm, and it was heading straight for their cabin. Little did they know, the next encounter with Karen would test their patience, their courage, and their love for their peaceful life. And it was Sarah who would soon realize, some people cannot be reasoned with. Some people can only be shut down. And in that moment, as the sun dipped behind the trees and shadows stretched across the cabin, the couple understood one thing clearly, their peaceful days were over. Something big was coming. And it was going to be unforgettable. The morning sun had barely risen over the pine-covered hills when John stepped outside to check the mailbox. He had hoped that maybe, just maybe, the threats from Karen were overblown, a minor misunderstanding that could be ignored. But as he approached, his heart sank. Another envelope from HOA Karen lay neatly on the porch. He picked it up slowly, almost afraid to see what it said this time. Sarah appeared behind him, holding 2 cups of coffee, her brow furrowed. Another one? She asked, her voice tense. John nodded, tearing the envelope open. Inside was a typed letter, perfectly formatted but sharp in tone. It has come to our attention that your garden path is not aligned according to the community guidelines. Immediate corrective action is required. Failure to comply will result in fines. HOA Karen. Sarah read it over his shoulder and let out a short laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. A garden path? Seriously? John sighed. I guess she really does want to control everything. Sarah's eyes narrowed. It's more than control, John. It's obsession. And I don't like it. As if on cue, a loud knock echoed through the cabin. John grabbed the door handle cautiously. There stood Karen, clipboard in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the porch as if she had just arrived to catch a crime in progress. Good morning, she said, her voice polite but edged with authority. I came by to inspect your garden path. It seems you haven't corrected it yet. John swallowed. We just moved in. We were planning to fix it soon. Karen tilted her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. Soon is not acceptable. The community guidelines are clear. You must comply immediately. Sarah stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it that made John feel proud and a little worried. Karen, she said, we just moved here. We didn't have time to change the garden yet. Can we have a week? Karen shook her head. Rules are rules. There are no exceptions. Your mailbox, your door, your garden path, all of it must be in compliance. John could feel the tension rising. The air seemed heavier, the trees around the cabin silent, as if they were watching the drama unfold. Then Karen did something unexpected. She pointed at a small statue near the garden, a little wooden rabbit John had placed to make the cabin feel homely. "This is not allowed," she said. "Decorations must be approved by the HOA. Please remove it immediately." Sarah stared at the rabbit, then at Karen. Her jaw tightened. "You want us to remove a wooden rabbit?" Karen nodded, perfectly serious. "Yes. Community standards must be maintained." John felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. "It's just a rabbit statue. It doesn't harm anyone." Karen's eyes narrowed. "The rules are clear." For a moment, the cabin was silent except for the faint sound of the wind through the pines. Then Sarah took a deep breath. Something inside her shifted. She looked Karen straight in the eye and said firmly, "We moved here to live peacefully. We follow rules, yes, but we will not let anyone control every little thing we do in our home." Karen blinked, slightly taken aback. She wasn't used to anyone speaking to her this way. Most people would nod, apologize, or quietly comply. Not Sarah. "You will comply," Karen said, her tone sharper now. "Or the fines will begin." Sarah didn't back down. "We're not ignoring rules, Karen. But we are not going to live in fear of every small thing. We'll fix the garden, but you will not dictate our home's character." Karen's expression hardened. "This is your warning. The HOA will take further action if necessary." With that, she turned sharply and left, her heels clicking on the wooden porch steps. John closed the door slowly, letting out a heavy sigh. Well, that escalated quickly. Sarah leaned against him. "It's okay. We're a team. We'll figure this out." "But John, we need to be ready." She's not going to stop. Over the next few days, tension settled like a cloud over the cabin. Karen appeared at unexpected times, sometimes in the distance, sometimes near the mailbox, always watching, always scrutinizing. Letters arrived with tiny complaints, each one more ridiculous than the last. A slightly crooked flower pot. A branch hanging too low. Even the direction their welcome mat faced became a problem. One evening, John and Sarah sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. The air was quiet, but the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow. "John," Sarah said softly, "this is more than rules. She wants control. She wants to make us feel like we're not allowed to live freely." John nodded slowly. "I know. But we can't let her win. This is our home, our life. We need to stay calm, but firm." Sarah's eyes glimmered with determination. "Yes. And I have an idea. We can't let her scare us. We need to be smart about this, and I'm not letting her take our cabin from us." John looked at her, a mixture of awe and nervousness. "Okay. I trust you." As night fell, the cabin lights glowed softly, casting warm shadows across the walls. Outside, the forest remained still, but the couple knew one thing clearly: HOA Karen was not going away. In fact, she had just begun. And deep inside, both John and Sarah felt the first spark of defiance. A quiet, burning determination that this cabin and their peace was not going to be hers to control. But Karen, she was clever, persistent, and relentless. And as the moon rose over the pine trees, it seemed almost as if she were waiting, somewhere nearby, planning her next move. The morning fog hung thick over the cabin, curling around the trees like a silent warning. John sipped his coffee on the porch, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. Ever since Karen's first visit, the air had changed. The peaceful forest now seemed to watch them, like it had taken sides in an invisible war. Sarah joined him, carrying a notebook filled with her own notes, measurements, reminders, and the ever-growing list of Karen's demands. "Look at this," she said, showing him the list. Mailbox, garden path, door color, welcome mat, and now the shrubs. She sent another letter last night about the shrubs. John grimaced. Shrubs? What could possibly be wrong with the shrubs? Sarah sighed. Apparently, They're too high according to HOA rules. It's insane. Before John could respond, the sound of a car approaching on the gravel driveway made them both tense. Karen had arrived again. She didn't knock this time. She simply stepped out of her car, notebook in hand, and walked straight toward the cabin with that unmistakable look of authority. This time, it wasn't just about rules. It was personal. Karen paused at the edge of the garden, examining the shrubs like a detective inspecting evidence. Then she pointed at a small, crooked branch. This branch is outside the approved height. You must prune it immediately, she declared. John opened his mouth to argue, but Sarah put a hand on his arm. She stepped forward herself, standing tall. Karen, she said, her voice calm but firm, we've only just moved in. We're making adjustments. The shrubs will be pruned, yes, but you cannot expect us to have everything perfect immediately. We are human, not machines. Karen's eyes narrowed. Community standards are not suggestions. You will comply. At that moment, something unexpected happened. A neighbor, who had been watching from across the street, walked over. She was an older woman with a kind face, carrying a basket of fresh apples. I hope I'm not interrupting, the neighbor said politely, but I just wanted to say, don't let her scare you. She's been this way with everyone. Just keep calm, do what you can, and don't let her ruin your life here. Karen's face stiffened, clearly annoyed by the interruption. She shot a sharp glare at the neighbor before turning back to John and Sarah. This is not a suggestion. You will comply, or the HOA will take further action. Sarah clenched her fists silently. She could feel her patience reaching its limit. But she didn't lash out. Instead, she smiled politely and said, "Thank you for your concern, but we are handling things. Now, Karen, we understand the rules, but we also value our peace. You must understand that too." Karen didn't respond. She scribbled something in her notebook, muttered under her breath, and left as abruptly as she had arrived. John and Sarah stood there, the tension thick in the air. She's relentless, John muttered. She's more than that, Sarah said quietly. She's obsessive. And I don't think she's going to stop anytime soon. That night, as the couple sat by the fireplace, the cabin seemed unusually quiet. But the silence was heavy, filled with anticipation. Every small sound, the creak of the wooden floor, the rustle of leaves outside, felt amplified. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. John poured another cup of coffee and handed it to Sarah. Do you think she'll ever leave us alone? He asked. Sarah shook her head. No. And that's why we have to be ready. She's testing us, trying to see how much control she can have. But she doesn't know us yet, and she doesn't know me. John raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Sarah leaned back, a determined glint in her eye. I mean, she's going to find out that we're not afraid. That she can't just dictate every little thing about our home. If she wants a battle, she'll get one. But she'll regret underestimating us. Outside, the moon rose high over the forest, casting silver light across the cabin. Shadows stretched across the walls, dancing like ghosts in the flickering firelight. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped, probably a deer, probably nothing. But in that moment, both John and Sarah felt the creeping realization, Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a storm. And storms don't end quietly. Over the next few days, the letters increased. Tiny issues, ridiculous demands, and veiled threats, everything seemed designed to wear them down. The couple worked on the garden, trimmed shrubs, repainted the door, and even straightened the mailbox. But each time they thought they were done, another problem appeared, as if Karen had an endless list of grievances. Sarah noticed a pattern. Karen would arrive after they finished a task, always appearing unexpectedly, always inspecting, always ready to point out something wrong. It was exhausting, and yet Sarah felt a strange satisfaction. Each time she stood her ground, Karen's control weakened just a little. John watched his wife with a mixture of admiration and concern. She had become the shield of their little home, the voice of defiance against an unreasonable authority. And deep down, he knew that the real battle wasn't just about shrubs or doors, it was about their right to live freely, peacefully, in the home they had worked so hard to create. As the week drew to a close, the cabin no longer felt like a simple refuge. It was now a fortress of willpower, a small stand against an overbearing force. And Sarah, more than anyone, had become the guardian. And somewhere, not far from the cabin, Karen was watching, plotting, and waiting for the next opportunity. She didn't know it yet, but the couple was ready. And the next confrontation would not be about rules. It would be about control. The sun had barely risen over the cabin, and a thin mist hovered over the forest. Birds chirped softly, but inside the cabin, a storm of tension brewed. For days, Karen had made their lives unbearable: letters, visits, and endless critiques, but today felt different. Sarah woke up with a sharp clarity. Today, she decided, she would no longer let Karen dictate the life in their home. She brewed coffee in silence, her hands steady, her mind focused. John noticed the determined look in her eyes and felt both admiration and worry. "Sarah, what are you planning?" he asked gently. "I'm going to talk to her. Face to face," she said, taking a deep breath. "Not to argue, not to fight, but to set boundaries. She needs to know that our home is ours, not hers." John nodded slowly. He trusted her instincts, but a part of him feared what might happen. Karen was unpredictable, relentless, and, well, Karen. By mid-morning, Karen appeared again, clipboard in hand, walking briskly toward the cabin like she owned the place. Sarah stepped onto the porch, her posture calm but strong. "Good morning, Karen," she said, smiling politely. "I'd like to have a word with you." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Oh. About what?" she asked, clearly curious and slightly suspicious. Sarah gestured toward the garden. "About everything. The garden, the mailbox, the rules, and about how we can coexist peacefully without constant fear of fines or complaints." Karen looked slightly taken aback. Most people would apologize, shuffle nervously, or nod. Not Sarah. She stood her ground. "I understand you care about rules," Sarah continued. "We do too. But your constant inspections and letters, they're making it impossible to enjoy our home. We are willing to follow community guidelines, but we will not live under fear of daily threats." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Fear? I am simply enforcing the rules," she said, her tone icy. Sarah stepped closer, calm but unwavering. "Enforcing rules is one thing. Controlling every aspect of our lives is another. We moved here for peace, not for someone to micromanage every detail of our home. We respect the rules, but we also respect our right to live freely." For the first time, Karen's confident posture faltered slightly. Sarah didn't let the moment slip. She continued, her voice steady and firm. "John and I are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for fairness. Rules are important, but kindness and understanding matter too. You cannot make us feel small in our own home." Karen stared at her, clipboard shaking slightly in her hands. It was clear she wasn't used to someone speaking this way, someone who didn't cower, someone who didn't apologize for simply living in their home. "Now," Sarah said, softening her tone just enough to be persuasive, "we can follow the rules, and we will. But you need to understand, this cabin belongs to us. And no rule, no matter how small, will make us afraid of living here." A tense silence filled the air. Karen's eyes narrowed, then softened just a little. She scribbled something in her notebook, muttered under her breath, and finally said, "I see. Very well. I will allow time for compliance, but don't test the HOA's patience." Sarah nodded politely. "Fair enough. We will comply, but on a reasonable timeline. Thank you." Karen turned sharply and walked back to her car. Sarah watched her go, a quiet satisfaction settling in her chest. John came up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, that was incredible. I've never seen you so composed and strong." Sarah smiled faintly, but her eyes were serious. "It's only the beginning. She will try again. But now, she knows that we are not afraid." And that matters. Over the next few days, Karen's visits became less aggressive. Letters still arrived, but the tone was slightly less threatening. It was as if Sarah's calm but firm stand had shaken her authority. For the first time, the couple felt a glimmer of hope. But Sarah knew better than to let her guard down. Karen was clever and persistent. She would find another way to assert control. And when she did, the couple would be ready. That night, as the moon cast silver shadows across the cabin, Sarah sat on the porch with John. The forest was quiet, the mist curling around the trees like a gentle shield. "We've won a small victory today," Sarah said softly, "but the real test is yet to come." John nodded. "And we'll face it together." The fire in the cabin crackled warmly, but outside, in the darkness, a shadow lingered. Karen had been watching. She hadn't expected resistance. And she certainly hadn't expected it from Sarah. One thing was clear: the war over the cabin had officially begun. And this time, it would not be one-sided. The morning was unusually crisp, and the sky over the cabin was painted in soft shades of gold and gray. John and Sarah had spent the previous night planning. After Sarah's first firm stand against Karen, they knew it was only a matter of time before she returned stronger, sharper, and ready to test them again. They were not wrong. By mid-morning, a familiar shadow appeared in the driveway. Karen's car rolled slowly toward the cabin. She stepped out, clipboard in hand, her sharp heels clicking on the gravel. But this time, she carried a new energy, more determination, more menace. She was ready for a battle. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, eyes steady. John followed quietly, sensing that this was going to be more than a polite conversation. "Good morning, Karen," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "I assume you've come to discuss the shrubs again?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "This is about your entire property. There are multiple violations, and fines will be applied if you do not comply immediately. I am here to ensure the rules are enforced." Sarah tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Rules are important, yes. But so is common sense. And control does not come from fear, Karen." Karen's lips pressed into a tight line. "You will comply." Sarah stepped closer, a quiet fire in her eyes. "Or what? You'll fine us? Take us to court? We've already started fixing things, but you cannot demand perfection overnight. And you cannot dictate how we live in our home." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Sarah held up a hand. "Let me finish. We respect the community, we respect the rules, and we are willing to cooperate. But we will not allow intimidation, threats, or constant surveillance. Our cabin, our peace, that belongs to us." For a tense moment, Karen said nothing. Her face was unreadable, but her sharp eyes flickered with surprise. No one had ever spoken to her like this, especially not calmly, politely, but firmly. Then, something unexpected happened. Sarah's cat, Muffy, darted past Karen, brushing against her leg and startling her. Karen jumped back, almost tripping on the porch. A brief, human moment cracked her stern facade. Sarah smiled subtly. "Even your rules cannot control everything, Karen," she said lightly. "Sometimes, life happens." Karen blinked, taken aback. Then she scribbled in her notebook, muttered something under her breath, and straightened her posture. "I see your point. But do not think this excuses continued violations. The HOA will continue inspections." Sarah nodded. "We understand. But we will not live in fear. And next time, I hope you understand, you cannot control our lives with threats." Karen's gaze lingered for a moment, sharp but conflicted. She was used to control, to fear, to people complying. But Sarah had thrown her off balance, not with anger, not with shouting, but with confidence, logic, and calm authority. Finally, Karen turned and walked back to her car. The click of her heels faded into the distance, leaving a quiet calm over the cabin. Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling the tension melt, but she knew it was only temporary. John stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her. "Sarah, that was incredible. You didn't just stand up for us, you stood up for our home. Sarah smiled, but her eyes remained sharp. It's only the beginning. Karen is clever. She will try again. But now she knows we are not afraid. Over the next few days, the cabin regained a small sense of peace. Karen's letters and visits became slightly less aggressive, though she still watched closely from a distance. Each time she appeared, Sarah remained firm, polite, and unshaken. And in the shadows of the forest, Karen watched, plotting. She hadn't expected resistance, and she certainly hadn't expected it from Sarah. But one thing was clear, the couple had drawn a line. And Karen would have to step carefully from now on. That night, the couple sat by the fire, sipping tea. The forest was quiet, the stars twinkling above the cabin. But Sarah's eyes were alert, thinking ahead. John, this was the first real stand. But I can feel it, Karen will try something bigger soon. And when she does, we need to be ready. John nodded. And we will face it together. No matter what she throws at us. Outside, in the dark woods beyond the cabin, a shadow lingered. Karen was not done. Not by a long shot. And the next move in this quiet war would be unexpected, clever, and maybe even ruthless. The next morning, the forest around the cabin was quiet, but inside Karen's car, chaos brewed. She sat behind the wheel, tapping her fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. Her clipboard rested on the passenger seat, filled with notes, letters, and little doodles of checkmarks and angry scribbles. Karen had never experienced anything like this. She had expected fear, tears, compliance. Instead, she found Sarah, calm, composed, and unafraid. The audacity of the woman made Karen's chest tighten with frustration. How dare anyone stand up to her, in her territory, in her community? Karen drove slowly past the cabin, observing from a distance. The garden was slightly messy, the shrubs still a little too high, and the mailbox leaning slightly to the right, but none of that mattered anymore. Karen's mind wasn't focused on rules, it was fixated on one thing, Sarah. She's bold, too bold, Karen muttered to herself. This is unacceptable. No one challenges me and gets away with it. For hours, Karen plotted. Letters, fines, surprise visits, she would try everything. Maybe she could call a meeting, involve the other HOA members, even dig up old rules to find a loophole. But every idea seemed less effective when she pictured Sarah standing tall, looking her dead in the eyes, calm as a summer morning. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Sarah and John were enjoying a rare moment of peace. The sun filtered through the trees, and the couple sipped tea on the porch, laughing softly about the small absurdities of their new life. Do you think she'll give up? John asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Sarah shook her head with a small smile. No. Karen doesn't give up. But she's human. And humans have limits. Hours passed. Karen made several slow drives past the cabin, checking every angle, every detail. Each time, she saw Sarah and John working calmly, tending to the garden, enjoying their home. Every tiny act of normal life frustrated her further. She's too content, Karen whispered, gripping her steering wheel. This shouldn't be happening. No one should enjoy life under my rules. By mid-afternoon, Karen decided to escalate. She pulled over, scribbled another letter, and drove to the community office to involve other HOA members. Her plan: create a formal complaint, schedule a meeting, and finally make John and Sarah compliant. Back at the cabin, Sarah found the letter in their mailbox. She unfolded it and read it aloud, her voice calm but amused. Community meeting regarding property violations. Attendance required. Signed, HOA Karen. Oh, this is going to be fun, Sarah said, smirking at John. John raised an eyebrow. Fun? This sounds serious. Sarah shook her head. No, John. It's exactly what I expected. Karen thinks she's winning because she can summon rules in meetings. But she doesn't understand us. And she certainly doesn't understand me. Later that evening, Karen sat alone in her house, surrounded by her notes and checklists. The shadows of the room stretched like fingers, reflecting her growing obsession. She muttered to herself, scribbling furiously. They will comply. They have to. Rules are rules. I cannot let them continue like this. Not in my community. Not in my HOA. Her husband called, asking about her late-night work. Karen didn't answer, too consumed by her thoughts. She paced the room, rereading her letters, thinking of new tactics, imagining ways to assert control. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. Sarah's calm defiance had cracked Karen's sense of absolute authority. For the first time in years, Karen wasn't entirely sure she would win. Back at the cabin, Sarah noticed a subtle shift over the next few days. Karen's visits were slightly less forceful. Her letters, though still formal, lacked the same venomous tone. Sarah smiled quietly to herself. John, she's frustrated. And frustrated people make mistakes, Sarah whispered. John laughed softly. So, we wait? Yes. We enjoy our home. We don't give her the satisfaction of fear or anger, Sarah replied. And when she slips, we'll be ready. Outside, the forest was calm again, the wind rustling through the pines. But Karen's shadow lingered somewhere nearby, invisible yet threatening, preparing for her next move. One thing was clear, she wasn't defeated. Not yet. But Sarah had shown her the truth: some people cannot be controlled by fear or rules. Some people fight for their home, and win. The sun rose slowly over the cabin, painting the forest with soft streaks of gold. Birds chirped as if nothing had happened, but for John and Sarah, the past weeks felt like a war they had quietly fought and won. Karen had not been completely defeated, but something had shifted. Her visits were fewer, her letters more polite, her tone less commanding. She had realized that Sarah and John were not ordinary residents. They were calm, composed, and unwilling to let fear control their lives. Sarah stood on the porch, sipping her coffee, and watched the sun filter through the pine trees. It's peaceful again, she said, smiling. At least, for now. John joined her, putting a hand on her shoulder. You handled Karen better than anyone could. I honestly didn't think we'd survive the first week. Sarah chuckled softly. I didn't just survive, I set boundaries. And that's the lesson here: rules are important, but courage matters more. Karen needed to see that control isn't everything. Respect, fairness, and calm resolve are what win in the end. Just then, a small movement caught their eyes. Muffy, their mischievous cat, darted past the garden, chasing a leaf blown by the wind. Sarah laughed. Even the little things remind us that life can't be controlled completely, not by rules, not by threats, not by anyone. John nodded. I feel like we've reclaimed our home. But Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. Karen isn't gone. She'll be back, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but she's persistent. And we'll be ready. Every time she tests us, we'll respond with calm and clarity. The next day, a letter arrived, but this time it was different. Karen's handwriting was less sharp, the tone almost apologetic. She mentioned that she appreciated the couple's cooperation and assured them that she would be monitoring compliance more reasonably. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sarah held the letter, smiling. This is proof that patience and courage work. You don't need to fight with anger or threats. Sometimes, standing firm quietly is enough. John smiled back. So, does this mean we've won? Sarah's eyes twinkled. We've won the first battle. And we've learned the most important thing: our home is ours, our peace is ours, and no one can take that if we don't let them. Karen may return, but she won't break us. Days passed, and life slowly returned to normal. They tended their garden, painted their mailbox in cheerful colors, and even added new decorations that Karen might have considered unapproved. And yet, they felt no fear. The forest around the cabin was calm, sunlight streaming through the tall pines. John and Sarah sat on the porch, watching their little paradise come alive with the sounds of nature. They had learned something deeper than rules or HOA disputes. They had learned resilience, partnership, and courage. In the distance, through the trees, Karen's car could be seen parked at the edge of the road, as if she were watching from afar. But this time, the couple didn't feel threatened. They were prepared. They had boundaries, confidence, and unity. And that was stronger than any HOA rule. Sarah whispered, more to herself than to John, "Some battles are about control. Others are about respect. We've won both." John laughed softly. "I think Karen might be the first HOA officer to meet her match." Sarah smiled, looking around at the cabin bathed in golden sunlight. "And maybe that's the story she'll remember for a long time." The camera pans out, the cabin framed by towering pine trees, sunlight sparkling on the leaves, birds chirping, and a gentle breeze rustling through the forest. The couple sits together, peaceful, victorious, but aware that life, just like HOA Karen, may always throw small challenges. And with that, the lesson is clear: peace in your home doesn't come from avoiding conflict, it comes from facing it calmly, standing firm, and protecting what truly matters. As the screen fades to black, a shadow moves in the distance, hinting that Karen may return, but the couple is ready. This is not just a story about HOA disputes. It's a story about courage, resilience, and the power of standing your ground. If you liked the video, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.